because you basically ducked 3 questions on this topic. My time is short. My question is, do you believe that the law requires women to become septic to get reproductive emergency medical care?
Well, I encourage everyone to follow the law. That's been my career. And as general counsel,
That's
if
not
confirmed,
the question. You'd be walking into a situation.
I believe the law is clear. Nothing in the law today prevents pregnant women from getting life-sustaining emergent treatment.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel that puts our nation and our constitutional values above everything else. If you believe in preserving the principles that made this country great, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of patriots who aren't afraid to speak the truth, and we need your support. Also, if you want to help us keep producing content that fights for conservative values and holds our government accountable, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst and support us for as little as $5 a month. Every contribution helps us stay independent and keep bringing you the real news that the mainstream media won't cover. Today we're going to break down a Senate confirmation hearing that perfectly demonstrates everything that's wrong with how the radical left approaches healthcare policy in this country.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stewart, let me start with you. As you sensed from our visit that I'm concerned about some of what you've been involved in West Virginia on the healthcare front. And so I'm going to get into a couple of the issues that you would have to deal with if confirmed. And I want to start with the Trump administration's record on the EMTALA law. For those that may not know the details of it, this is the law that requires hospitals to provide emergency stabilizing treatment for all patients that show up at their door. After the Dobbs case, the Biden administration provided clarity that hospitals must provide stabilizing reproductive health care in all states. So the Trump administration, one of the first things they wanted to do was to get rid of that guidance. And women have been suffering, even dying, and there's even more chaos and confusion. And at the heart of the problem is under the Trump approach, doctors play lawyers, lawyers play doctors, women are suffering, and they tell us, we had one witness, they're in the emergency room and people are arguing about what to do. Women suffering, even dying under these Trump rules. So my first question to you is, do you believe that EMTALA, this federal law that I just described, requires women to become septic or at risk of death to receive emergency reproductive medical care?
Well, I appreciate the question, Senator. And first, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to meet with you yesterday. And I look forward to many opportunities in the future, if confirmed, to be able to work with you and your staff on important issues like this. You know, I've taken a look at the law with respect to...
My time is short. My question is, do you believe that the law requires women to become septic to get reproductive emergency medical care?
Well, thank you for the question. The answer to that question is nothing in the law prevents emergency treatment for pregnant women. Nothing in the law today prevents that.
Well, what would you do? Let's do it this way because you're ducking the question. But what would you do to make sure that hospitals comply with this law that I just read to you? You get this job. What would you do to make sure that hospitals comply with the law that I just read you?
Well, I encourage everyone to follow the law. That's been my career. And as general counsel, if confirmed...
That's not the question. You'd be walking into a situation where in hospitals, there's so much chaos and so much confusion. Women get hurt. And it's because, as we've heard testimony, the doctors play lawyers, the lawyers play doctors, they go back and forth. We need somebody who's going to step in and make sure that women are protected in line with the law. And I've asked you 2 questions already, and I'd really like to know if you get confirmed, what are you going to do to step in and deal with this confusion and chaos about the law that's hurting women?
Well, my answer is that I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, but I will provide guidance with respect to the law. I believe the law is clear. Nothing in the law today prevents pregnant women from getting life-sustaining emergent treatment when they're at a hospital.
I'm going to move on because you basically ducked 3 questions on this topic. If you'd like to send us something in writing that would describe how you would actually make sure that hospitals are following the law, not encouraging and all the rest, but actually following it, I'd like to see it.
What you just watched was Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, attempting to ambush a nominee with loaded questions about emergency medical care and reproductive health. This is a textbook example of how Democrats use confirmation hearings not to assess qualifications, but to push their extreme political agenda. Let's start with the facts about EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. This law has been on the books since 1986, signed by President Reagan, and it requires hospitals to provide emergency medical screening and stabilizing treatment regardless of a patient's ability to pay. It's a good law that ensures no one is turned away from an emergency room in a life-threatening situation. The law works, and it has worked for decades without controversy. But here's where the Biden administration decided to weaponize this law for political purposes. They issued guidance claiming that EMTALA requires hospitals to perform abortions even in states where abortion is restricted or banned. This isn't what the law says, and it's not what Congress intended when they passed it nearly 40 years ago. The Biden administration took a law designed to ensure emergency medical care and twisted it into a mandate for abortion on demand. What Senator Wyden is doing in this hearing is deeply dishonest. He's trying to force the nominee to agree with the Biden administration's radical interpretation of EMTALA by using inflammatory language about women becoming septic and dying. This is fear-mongering at its worst. No one, and I mean no one, is advocating for letting women die in emergency rooms. That's not what this debate is about, and Wyden knows it. The real issue here is about the proper interpretation of federal law and respect for state sovereignty. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision, they returned the authority to regulate abortion to the states, where it belongs according to the Constitution. The Biden administration couldn't accept this democratic outcome, so they've been trying to use federal agencies and existing laws to impose their abortion agenda on states that have chosen to protect unborn life. Let's talk about what actually happens in emergency rooms when pregnant women need care. Hospitals and doctors are not sitting around letting women die because they're afraid of lawsuits. That's a Democratic talking point, not reality. Medical professionals take the Hippocratic Oath seriously, and they provide life-saving care when it's needed. The idea that doctors are playing lawyers and lawyers are playing doctors is a false narrative designed to create fear and justify federal overreach. The confusion that Wyden mentions isn't coming from a law itself. It's coming from the Biden administration's attempts to reinterpret existing law to achieve political goals they couldn't accomplish through the democratic process. When you have federal agencies issuing guidance that contradicts state law, of course there's going to be confusion. The solution isn't more federal overreach, it's respecting the constitutional division of powers between federal and state governments. Mr. Stewart, the nominee in this exchange, handled this ambush perfectly. He correctly stated that nothing in EMTALA prevents emergency treatment for pregnant women, which is absolutely true. The law requires stabilizing treatment for emergency medical conditions, and that applies to pregnant women just like everyone else. But Wyden wasn't interested in the actual law. He wanted a political soundbite he could use to attack conservatives. This is exactly the kind of judicial activism and bureaucratic overreach that conservatives have been warning about for years. The left can't win on the merits of their arguments, so they try to use unelected bureaucrats and activist judges to impose their will on the American people. They take laws that were passed for one purpose and stretch them beyond recognition to achieve political goals that Congress never intended. The abortion debate should be decided by the people through their elected representatives in state legislatures, not by federal bureaucrats issuing guidance memos. That's how democracy is supposed to work. But Democrats have become so extreme on abortion that they can't accept any limits whatsoever, even when those limits are democratically enacted by the people of individual states. What's particularly troubling about this hearing is how Wyden tried to bully the nominee into giving him the answer he wanted. This isn't how confirmation hearings should work. Senators are supposed to assess whether nominees are qualified for their positions, not try to extract political commitments that go beyond what the law requires. Stewart was right to stick to the actual text of the law rather than give in to Wyden's political pressure. The broader context here is important too. This nomination was taking place during the Trump administration's efforts to restore constitutional governance and roll back the regulatory overreach of the Obama and Biden years. The Trump administration understood that federal agencies had been weaponized to push liberal political agendas, and they were working to return these agencies to their proper constitutional role. When Wyden complains about the Trump administration removing Biden-era guidance on EMTALA, he's actually complaining about the restoration of proper federal-state balance. The federal government shouldn't be using emergency medical laws to force states to violate their own democratically enacted protections for unborn life. That's not what EMTALA was designed for, and it's not a proper use of federal power. Let's also address the fundamental dishonesty in how Democrats frame this issue. They claim that pro-life laws are causing women to die, but they can never point to specific cases where this has actually happened. What they do is take tragic cases where women died due to medical complications and falsely claim that pro-life laws were responsible, even when the facts don't support that conclusion. The reality is that every pro-life law in America includes exceptions for situations where the mother's life is in danger. These aren't theoretical exceptions, they're real legal protections that doctors can and do use when necessary. The idea that doctors are letting women die because they're confused about the law is a myth perpetuated by abortion activists who want to eliminate all restrictions on abortion. What's really happening is that some abortion providers are using these false narratives to pressure state legislatures into weakening their pro-life laws. They're essentially holding women's health hostage to their political agenda. Instead of working within the framework of existing laws, which already protect women's lives, they're creating confusion and fear to advance their ideological goals. This Senate hearing also demonstrates the importance of nominating judges and executive branch officials who understand the proper role of government and won't be intimidated by political pressure from the left. Stewart showed exactly the kind of backbone we need in government officials. He stuck to the law as written rather than giving in to Wyden's demands for political theater. The American people deserve government officials who will follow the Constitution and respect the democratic process, not activists who will use their positions to impose their personal political beliefs on the country. That's why these confirmation hearings matter so much and why it's so important that conservatives stay engaged in the political process. We also need to understand that this attack on EMTALA interpretation is part of a broader pattern of federal overreach that threatens the constitutional balance of power in our system. When federal agencies can reinterpret existing laws to achieve political goals that Congress never authorized, we're no longer living under the rule of law. We're living under the rule of bureaucrats who think they know better than the American people. The solution to this problem isn't more federal guidance or more bureaucratic interpretations of existing law. The solution is returning power to where it belongs under our Constitution, with the states and the people. If people want different abortion laws, they can vote for different representatives in their state legislatures. That's how democracy works. But Democrats don't want democracy when it comes to abortion. They want judicial supremacy and bureaucratic rule because they know their extreme positions can't win in the democratic arena. They've become so invested in abortion on demand that they're willing to undermine our entire constitutional system to achieve their goals. This is why the 2024 election was so important and why we need to stay engaged in politics at every level. The deep state bureaucrats who were trying to reinterpret EMTALA to force abortions on unwilling states are still there, and they're still trying to find ways to impose their agenda on the American people. We need more nominees like Stewart who understand that their job is to follow the law as written, not to implement their personal political agenda. We need officials who respect the Constitution and the proper division of powers between federal and state government. And we need to hold our elected representatives accountable when they use their positions to push extreme political agendas rather than serve the American people. The battle over EMTALA interpretation is really a battle over the soul of American government. Do we want to live under the Constitution, with power divided between different levels of government and ultimate authority resting with the people? Or do we want to live under the rule of unelected bureaucrats who think they can rewrite laws to achieve whatever political goals they happen to support? That's the choice we face, and it's why channels like America First are so important. We're not going to let the mainstream media control the narrative on these crucial issues. We're going to tell you the truth about what's really happening in Washington, even when that truth is uncomfortable for the political establishment. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're building a movement of informed patriots who understand what's really at stake in these political battles. And remember, you can support our work by becoming a patron at patreon.com/America First for just $5 a month. Your support helps us stay independent and keep bringing you the real news that the establishment doesn't want you to hear. The fight for constitutional government and respect for life is far from over. But with informed patriots like you staying engaged and holding our leaders accountable, I'm confident that we can restore the principles that made America great. Thanks for watching America First, and I'll see you in the next video.